Hi, I'm Kristine Ballard.
And I'm Melony Smirniotis.
And welcome to Art and Up, the place where creatives connect, cultivate and support each other's artistic journey. Today, we are going a little left of centre and we're going to talk to the amazing
Pete Kennedy from Framing Life at Boronia Park, Sydney. Welcome, Pete.
Hello, how are you doing?
Welcome.
I'm good. I'm going to just throw it out there and say, how long have you been in this business for? And I really want to know, how did you get into it?
I've probably been in the business now for just over, around about 20 years, probably just a little bit over. How I got into it, I used to do a few craft markets on the weekends and things like that. Well, I had a normal, what I call a normal job. And that sort of, I was making a few things and then making a few frames. I used to sort of get some old historic photos of the area and things like that and sell them. And then people then sort of just come and said, used to sort of give me things to frame, sort of photos and cross stitches and things like that. And so, I sort of pretty well like to give everything a go. So then I sort of started to do that. And then it started to get to a point where I was thinking, well, I need to know a little bit more. So I did more of an advanced sort of course. And then it just sort of grew from there. And then I used to sort of work like two jobs. Used to work this sort of more hobby type framing, probably what people call a backyard job, backyard business, and have another safe, secure job with the local council. And then it just started to get like long days. And then I just decided, after quite a bit of thought and anxiety, to ditch a nice safe job at the council and start a business on my own. So
as you do,
sort of it. Just as 9/11 happened, so that's sort of when that was sort of almost the week I started left the council and started my business. So I think, what have I done? Why have I thrown in a nice, comfy job at the council and now World War III is going to start? But anyway, it didn't.
So, Pete, where are you located? And if you could tell us the scope of services that you provide in your framing business.
Okay, I'm located. It's a funny area. It's in a suburb called Boronia Park, so it sort of borders on Hunters Hill, Gladesville. You can almost go by two postcodes if you want it, because we're right on the border. Technically, it's in a Ryde Council area, but so it's on Pittwater Road, which the top of Pittwater Road runs from Gladesville, Victoria Road, Gladesville, and the other end of Pittwater Road runs onto Epping Road.
And what are the varieties of work you do? Because framing covers quite a lot of variety.
Because of coming from a sort of a bit of an arts and craft background, so I used to then sort of produce a few what I would call products and things like that myself. So I still like to do things like that, sort of have so we do things like football display boxes and things like that. Because I've been into photography, I've always had the sort of printing side of it, which is good. And then we sell, I try and sell my own sort of photography work and that as well. But in the custom framing side, it covers quite a big range. We deal with artists, we deal with schools, we just deal with the mums and dads and things like that, and the little grannies and things like that as well. So
that's specifically for fine artists.
Yep.
Like what's your approach with them? Because I do know you do have an approach, and all the fine artists that I've recommended go to you all come back, with glowing reviews. And so how would you explain your approach and maybe things that they could take into consideration before even, bringing their work in?
The first thing they need to work out is like who they are and how they want to present their work. For artists and people who are displaying in things like galleries and shows and things like that, there's generally a nice neutral sort of way of doing framing. The most important thing is, one, that we don't damage the people's artwork. But my approach is it's almost that sort of keep it simple type scenario. But the person themselves has to sort of know a little bit what they sort of want or how they want their artwork to look, whether they want it to look dynamic or quite neutral and things like that. I'll always, if I'm mounting, I'll always mount with a neutral mount. Often it's just a single mat or two mats in the same colour. And yeah, you can get a little bit, it almost seems a bit boring getting with sort of, I don't love white frames and things like that, but that's sort of what, helps sell type of thing. There's a little bit of a compromise with things like, costs and things like that. So, but just they got to know who they are and how they want to be looked at and things like that. Because I can change. I won't say that every framing style is this type of thing. I can sort of work out. We have a lot of different sort of styles that we can pick and choose type of thing or gravitate towards. Some people like sort of that sort of nice natural earthy stuff. Some like classic black, just a simple white mat and a black, especially in photography, especially in black and white photography. You just can't beat a white mat and a black frame. It will be in vogue in 50 years' time. It's keeping it simple, but just knowing what they've got to know who they are. We can't create who they are. They've got to know who they are.
So if we get to the beginning of the process, the problem that us artists have is how we should measure our artworks properly. What could make your life easier?
As in measurements in size?
Yes, like, people will go, it's about this big or that big. I know that proper measurements are always good, but there's also, I think you always use millimeters down to the millimeter, and the width of things matters too. How should people, if they're asking you for a quote, people's visual is very different to how you would probably measure that. What would you suggest is the best way for us to do that?
Look, if someone comes with inches, that's fair enough. I've got a tape measure with inches and I can just sort of quickly convert it. Obviously, millimeters is a better way to sort of do it or give me a measurement and things like that. So, in millimeters is best, but if they very rare, most of the time they will come in millimeters. Just photographers often come in inches. They'll come in with a 11 by 14 or, sort of a 16 by 20 inch photo and things like that. So just in millimeters, but it's very hard to give a quote over the phone. It's, what I would generally do if people ring up for a quote over the phone is sort of give them a range and that, because there's a big range. So it's very hard to give a quote. That's always best if they come in and have a chat and get a feel for your framer, and your framer gets a feel for your artist, and you get to know each other. Then after that process, it becomes quite an easy process. But it is hard because it's not like buying a Holden car or a car where you can just go and ring every dealer and say, I'm looking for a 2020 Holden or whatever. I can't get Holdens anymore, but it could give me your best price. And then they ring here, there and everywhere. With framing, it's it's so you can't ring up and just sort of you really can't ring up, and you can get a ballpark on cost, but it would be a ballpark. And because I've been caught where you do give quotes over the phone, and then when they bring it in, it's a little bit different, or especially in stretching and things like that, there's a bit more work involved in it, things like that. So, and then they go, oh, you said it was this, you know. So it's hard to give a quote over the phone, but millimeters and size is good. And often, sometimes they get requirements that they can only have things a certain size, so they're almost working from the outside in as well. So.
And what about turnaround? I know that people want things instantaneously, but what's realistic in terms of turnaround?
Anyone that realistically 10 days would be what I would call sort of average. Certainly, again, and again, if you've got an artist that you have a particular relationship with and things like that, then you can almost do it nearly on the spot or on the day, especially if you sort of know that they like the natural frame or a white frame, and you always know that you've got stock of things like that. And when you do have someone regularly, you will sort of you will stock stuff, and you will get it through a little bit quicker. But generally, most people with custom framing, when it's what I'd say normal is sort of like it's almost a 2-week turnaround. So it just depends on the numbers and things like that. Like people sometimes say, oh, how much for 2? Well, it takes the same amount of time to do 1 than it is 2. This isn't where you just sort of package stuff up. Cutting a frame, which is 300 mil by 300 mil, takes the exact same time as cutting a frame by a metre by a metre. And there's 4 joins. So it doesn't matter if it's a metre by metre or 300 by 300. So you can't, just because you've got numbers, you can't necessarily get things out a lot quicker. You can, but it's not always the sort of case. It still takes time. So
Pete, I think that's the thing, is learning a little bit of the language. And artists seem to be a little bit, in my experience, a bit scared of the framer because they don't understand what they're meant to say. And having that relationship up front, like you mentioned with timing too, can really help, because if you have that conversation earlier, then you can work back. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about, the terminology, so that when people are asking you things like moulding and a shadow box and a skirt and all that kind of stuff, people are like, well, what is that? What does that include? And things like that, where someone else might say, oh, it's just the frame. There's a lot of pieces that get involved with the construction of that.
Yeah.
And I don't think people understand all the pieces that get involved, even right down to the tape you use. I know it's like moisture proof, so it does, like, there's a lot of care and consideration in all those items. And I think for every one of us, the artists out there, we really would love to know a little bit more about your terminology, so that when we're asking you, we might be able to ask for the closer thing that we think we want.
Yeah.
So a moulding is the timber bit, right? It's the
moulding.
what's behind you, pretty much.
Yeah, the moulding is the timber. So that's the frame. That's technically the frame.
Mm-hmm.
That comes in a general rebate, or sometimes comes what they call in a box frame, which has got a deeper rebate. Mm-hmm. And then with what they put on a lot of canvas these days is the shadow, which almost a shadow type frame, or a spacer frame. That's that frame that goes around a stretched canvas.
And it has a gap between the canvas and
normally has a small gap.
Space. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got so you got your sort of what you'd call a normal frame, then you've got box type frames, then you've got your shadow frames, and then sometimes you've got, and then you can also have a a spacer frame where you can create a bit of depth within a frame as well. So they're the three types. They're the three types of frame, but which then has many different parts off that.
And they're often determined, even though we might see all these wonderful frames behind you, it also is determined by the thickness of the artwork that you might bring in too, isn't it? You know, you can do a lot of moving things around, but I know that that's been a fact where, you know, if you've got a wider canvas, then there's particular frames you can't have, even though they might look amazing.
That's correct. Because especially in the box type, those shadow type frames, they don't make an abundance amount, unlike in golds and blacks and things like that, where you've got a huge selection. In your shadow frames, there's not that many to choose from, so it's not hard to actually pick a frame for it. But then again, artists that bring in artworks that are already stretched, then depending on what box type, what thickness type stretcher bar that's been used on it, we can only use what it's going to fit. So there is quite a lot of most things will get covered, but there is a lot of limitation in those sort of more shadow type frames.
Can you tell us about art glass versus normal glass?
Okay, so there's about four types of glass in reality. So there's your normal everyday picture framing glass, which is a 30% UV UV blocking, just your general reflective everyday glass. It's funny, people think sometimes you give a quote on something and they say, does that include the glass? And I think they did a survey once on what people thought the most expensive part of the frame was, and this was before a lot of this sort of new art glass and all that come out, and they said, oh, the glass is the most, which is actually not. It's probably the most cheapest part of it, but because they think it's delicate and it's fragile and things like that, it must be expensive. So your general everyday glass is your stock standard picture framing clear glass. Probably use that on now. It's getting a lot less. We use that on probably about 60-70% of work. Most people that want something for a kid's bedroom, spare bedroom, that's as good as you need. Then you've got what we call the art glass. That's got a 70% UV protection, but it's got this slight film, so it gives a much better clarity and a lot less reflection without it being that old-fashioned kind of non-reflective type of glass. That is the most superior glass. It covers a lot of things. It covers a reasonable cost with a high quality. And if you're an artist, and I know that it adds up and things like that, I know the cost adds up, but if you want to showcase your artwork, I would recommend strongly you use that.
No comparison.
There's no comparison.
Yeah.
And then what artists have then got to think of is, okay, sometimes we're the last part of the food chain. So they got an artwork that they think they've got an X amount, then they've got a gallery which is going to take 25%, and then they're doing the sums, and then all of a sudden, bang, everything starts going down. So, but an artist has got to think the other way and think, I need $400 for this, and then you add up from there rather than come down. There's another glass which is like an art. It is an art glass, but it has instead of 70% has about 99%. That is next level in cost. That's if you've got something like a one-off at home that you want to have ultimate protection. But in reality, if you've got something at home that is worth that much amount of money, an UltraView Perspex is the way to go.
Either that or lock it up.
Yeah, that'll lock it up. Yeah, because glass will break. So if you've got something that is of the financial, emotional value to that extent, then I would always recommend using Perspex. But certainly an artist, they should always use the UltraView glass.
But with COVID, is that how the hours changed, or?
No, the hours are still the same. My official hours are 9:30 till 5:30, but I could be in here at 6:30. I could be in here at 5. I generally will leave. I work better early in the morning than late at night, unless there's something in particular that I need to do late at night. But I work better in the morning, so I'll generally be out of here by about 6 o'clock or something like that. I used to open late on Thursdays, but just started getting sort of too late. And Saturdays, we're open from 10 till 2. I could, if I had someone to work for me on a Sunday, I would open on a Sunday. I think Sunday would be a good day, because I find people for the custom side of framing find it hard to find the time to come. So that's why sometimes COVID's pretty good, because they get to do those sort of jobs. That's why January can be quite busy for us, because they're finally on holidays and finally getting to do those things. I have people bringing things that they've waited 5 years to get done. So it's just finding that time.
So Pete, do you have any standout moments in your framing, any really brilliant jobs that might have given you grief and they came out really great, or they were for a particular event, perhaps?
For particular events, we've done a few sort of fundraising type things. Like, you don't often earn a lot of money on those, but they give you a lot of satisfaction. It's when you make a customer cry, it gives you that sort of sense of that.
In a good way.
In a good way. Yeah, not a bad way. It gives you that sense of, you've made an impact in their lives. And when you hear, it's not so much is there a particular job that's done it, but it's when you hear things like, oh, you framed that for us last week, and everyone that walks in says, wow, where did you get that done, and things like that. Or when they say things like, it's the first thing I see when I walk through the door, and I always remember, not saying they remember me, but they remember, it always reminds them. So it's different for an artist doing sort of production stuff for an art show and things like that. But when you've got those sort of custom sort of things where you do this sort of nights, it's the whole sort of process. It's the whole kind of, coming up with the design, getting it done on time, and then being sort of totally sort of, and then sometimes you get those tears, and sometimes it's that little bit of memorabilia left from after a parent passes away, and it's the last bit of where everything's been broken up, and during that kind of process and things like that. It's that thing where they remember grandma and things like that.
I think, though, with any framer, it's about building relationships, isn't it, between you and the customer? And it sounds like that's part of the story. Even as an artist, you want to build that relationship so that you end up talking the same language and you can make great things together almost. I know that as an artist, we're not very good at making the best of frames picking. We're much better to feel confident in someone who knows what they're doing. And you have you have a bit of a good reputation with that. So that sort of being passed on reputation via, you know, along the grapevine is a good thing too.
That is, you can have as much social media, you can have as much everything else, but it is literally word of mouth. It is word of mouth, and that's what has got me through the last 18 months, 2 years, since a lot of COVID, that I've been able to just rely on that kind of old foot traffic almost, that you know, no one comes in and you're not getting a love job, or just sort of, oh, let's just go and support, you know, Pete or the local picture framer or something like that. You know, generally they want something done, but having that kind of I wouldn't even say database, that kind of history.
You're getting work via reputation, really.
Yeah.
But they'll know, I suppose there'll be happy tears from me next week. Yeah, very excited. What about, let's talk about your photography. Like, what's going on with that? Where can we see it? Where can we view it? How do you start?
Look, I have it on my website. Spent a lot of money on getting a new website, and that is also probably the most important aspect, rather than social media and things like that. Whereas most people will go, especially a lot of my corporate, you know, most people will go, oh, I need a framer, just Google. So they'll just go on to Google picture framer and Ryde, Gladesville, you know, nearest picture framer near me, especially things like for corporate stuff where, you know, the big boss tells the PA, you know, I need this sort of, you know, need these things framed for this show or something like that, and they, oh, I don't know what to do, so they just Google. So yeah, I think Google and a good website is far more important than social media for this business. It should be there, but it doesn't. It doesn't have. It's not the most important thing. I think I sort of went off your question a bit. What was that?
Your photography.
My photography, yeah. Look, I like sports. I've always liked sports. I'll often find myself at a professional sporting match, looking at sideline photographers more than the game itself. And I've got to know, I would say I've got to know a couple of the professional ones, and certainly sport photography. Professional sport photography has changed a lot in the last 3-4 years, where a lot of the guys I sort of knew were like staff photographers for the Daily Telegraph and things like that. So they went to all the games, they went to the Olympics and things like that. And then in the last 5 years, they've all been put off, and now they're trying to wave their way through themselves through Getty Images and things like that. So, but I've always I like sport, and I like sport photography. I like a good sport photo. So that's always been a passion of mine. So I enjoy sport photography, and I enjoy landscape photography. And they're two different things, because the sport photography is quite, it's very emotional. It's very kind of intense. You know, it's running up and down the sideline. It's sort of, it's developing, and you also develop relationships within the sporting codes and things like that, and the players, especially with me, because I'll just do a certain type of clubs and things like that. So you develop that kind of relationship. So it's nice and seeing that. It's nice seeing players that you photographed at 14 and 15 and 16 and 17 and go and play for the top, you know, netball or rugby league and things like that. Whereas a landscape, it's quite different. It's quite peaceful and quite surreal. It's you know, nice morning sunrises or afternoon sunsets, but lot more morning sunrises, where you just feel that there's, no matter what's happened the day before, it's just a nice calming way to start the day, and you just think that you've got this whole land to yourself type of thing, although you never do. But it's a nice calming kind of feeling. And the other side I'd like to get a little bit more into, but I'm finding it hard to sort of do, not because I'm finding it hard to probably would get subjects, but is sport portraiture. That's sort of one thing. I've got kids that you see kids play junior rep football or junior football or whatever sport, and I just think that they should have a nice portrait of those sort of memories, especially ones that maybe make a rep team or something like that. It might be not everyone goes and plays for a professional NRL team or netball team, but so I just think that from a personal point of view, that I think a lot of kids should have a nice sports portrait, and I enjoy photographing the things that I like looking at. I like looking at nice sports portraits and things like that. Not sort of into the weddings and stuff like that. I just don't have the energy or the capacity to do that.
So we head to your website and we'll list that.
Yep.
No problem. And we'll list all the details for life as well.
Yeah.
Been really insightful. Even just learning about molding. Like I didn't know that. Because it's not something I think about. I think about the aesthetic of the frame. I don't think about the technical.
Yeah, like in a white, say a white frame, a white molding. You've got ones that are that are smooth, that are laminated, and you've got ones that are painted white. So you've got these two kind of styles that are physically look exactly the same, but one's got a smooth finish and one, I wouldn't say a rough finish, but it's got a natural, you can see the natural timber in it. So often that relates to two different kind of style of artworks and that as well. So the molding gives you the vibe of what's going on, and it is the most important element in the framing side of it, apart from the mounting, which is probably the most important. But for what you see aesthetically, the molding, the size of the molding, the proportion between the mount and the molding and the subject matter within that it makes or breaks it. And that's not something that there's no sort of guide, there's no book, there's nothing to say that, okay, so if you've got a 500 by 400 artwork, it should have a 75mm mat and a 30mm frame. That's not, there's no rule book like that. And unfortunately, I do a lot of stuff because I've done it for so long that you do it on feel, and that's where, so it's hard to sort of explain and sort of say, sometimes you just say, look, I'll get it right. Don't just, but it will make or break that. And people won't understand what makes an artwork. So when they do see it and they tear up or whatever, they go, wow, that's just perfect. They won't understand why all these sort of things, all these different things come together. And they don't see it when you're putting it down on your table where you've just got a corner sample. They don't understand. They can't see that. And I get that. I get that totally, that, I wish I could see it all the way around. And I'll just say, look, just trust me. I'll get it right for you. Mm. But a good framer will get it right. There's the balance of what's in there. Whether if you've got some people do portraits of like head and shoulders, well, they need a wider frame than a head to toe kind of portrait and things like that. If there's a wedding photo of just the couple just in this little hill and then there's all this vast landscape, well, then that works better with a more narrow frame. So that there's a balance within the thickness of the moulding, the texture of the moulding, that brings all of this artwork to life. And also people say things like, oh, I don't want a fancy frame. You know, they bring this beautiful piece of artwork out and they go, I don't want a fancy frame. And I say, well, actually, no, you do want a fancy frame because you've got this beautiful piece of artwork. You want a frame out here to sort of, it gives people the sense of balance, of strength, of vibe, of that kind of, and it's a subconscious thing. No one will go, well, you know, they won't understand it, but it will just sort of, when all those stars align, that's when they cry.
Yeah. I think that's the trick, isn't it? You know, with any creative pursuit, you hide all the effort involved. It should look like it was just happening, but there's a lot of skill that goes into that.
And that's a skill that is, it can't be, it's not a real theory type of thing. It's a rough theory, but yeah, like generally, yeah, it takes a long time to develop that. I'm not saying I'm great at it or whatever, but it's got me by for 20 years. So there must be something right. I don't know what.
Yeah, I keep coming back and sending everyone to you. So yeah, highly recommend Framing Life at Boronia Park. Great team there. So thank you so much. I've learned so much, and it's been lovely just giving that little backstory and being able to share that with the audience.
And if I can just sort of say, the other reason, like a lot of people are scared of framers, is because they don't understand, they don't know what it's going to cost them. And I've had like people come in with their parents, you know, sort of like a 20-year-old woman that's bought a print and comes in with her parents because they think they're going to get, they don't know what they're going to get charged. They literally walk in and they've got a subconscious feeling of, if it's between this and this, and yeah, okay, you know, that this is all right. This is sort of, it's like, it's just, it's so, and you can tell the ones that come in like that. They've got no, they're scared of what, they're obviously scared of getting ripped off because they don't understand the process. They don't understand what goes in there. And like, I can, for one piece of artwork, I can do 4 or 5 price points and they'll still all look good. And I don't sort of go, this is the price point. If your price point's down a little bit, okay, well, we can use a more generic frame. We can use regular glass. We can use a single mat. You know, I can get you there. But that's the thing. They just don't understand where the cost is, and you know, and then when you see things at IKEA and that for $20, oh, you know. But yeah, it's a wonderful business, and I enjoy working with artists. I like to develop artists and photographers, and that's another thing I want to get into a little bit more, especially for the photographer side and things like that. That they don't understand that the printing side. They don't understand how many sort of sizes they should print, and things like that. And they end up making it too difficult for themselves, and they go, "This is just too hard. I can't do this." So yeah, I like to work with people and develop people and things like that.
I think that's the tip, though, isn't it? That I in my experience, Pete, is that have a conversation up front. If you're doing a collection of works or something, you know, even sizes of Bainbridge board, you know, you might be able to get 2 out of one size. If you decide to do a little tricky size, it's going to cost you double. You should have a conversation with your framer, to everyone.
That's
and
exactly
they have
right.
got great tips. It's like, you know, if you just got these ones, it also makes it easy for the framer because then they can bulk make your frames if you've got a collection coming up. So having that relationship, you both get to learn from each other. And I think we need to be, like you said, less scared of that because there's a lot we can both learn. And we're all trying to make everyone look as good as possible. And also that consideration and care that you put into your artwork, the framer really wants to do that too. They're not trying to rip you off. They're trying to make it work as best as possible within your budget. And I think that's the really lovely thing that I've found, that when you have build a relationship with a framer, that it becomes part of the creating, you know. It's not just an add-on. It's part of that. It's part of your budget. It's part of your time frames for shows.
Exactly.
And it like all of us, if you give people enough time to do a really great job, you'll get more than you expect often, all the time.
There was a good thing that I saw once in a magazine saying that, you know, we do top good pricing, good service, good quality, but you can only choose 2 of those things at a time. And that's the thing. If you want to rush me, then, and you want a cheaper price, well, don't expect the quality to be sort of good. But if you want to rush me and you want the quality, well, then think that you're going to have to pay a higher price type of thing. So, it's developing that relationship, and when it all works, it works. There's nothing to be scared of, and I'm happy to answer any questions when they're not sure about things. But you're 100% right in the fact that you know, often a normal size mat board, which comes say 1 metre by 800, well, then if you're making something which is 500 by 400, well, that's good, because you can get 4 out of the sheet. So it's often based on there's a sheet of mat board. Can I get 2 out of it? Do I only get 1 out of it? Do I get 4 out of it? And things like that. So there are little things like that, and also your glass size. It comes a certain size. Once you go 10 mil over it, well, then you're into another level of glass size and things like that. So sometimes they go and make these things, and they go, oh, now it's going to cost. So sometimes, yes, if they've got an idea, have a chat with us first, and then we can say, look, if you just make it a little bit smaller, if we make it fit this, then we're in this price point. Once we go out of this size, we're in now this price point.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Pete.
Thanks
so much for your time. Looking forward to putting it all together. So I'll see you next week.
All right.
Thanks for your great insights, Pete.
Thanks very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.